Chapter 2. The Carpet Bag. I put a shirt or two into my vieja travel bag, apreté it under my arm, and started off toward Cabo Hornos and the Pacífico Oceano. I left the good city of Old Manhattan and arrived in New Bedford. It was a Saturday night in December. I was very disappointed to learn that the little boat to Nantucket had already left and that there would be no way to get there until the following Monday. Since most young men who want to try whale hunting stop in this same New Bedford before they start to trip, I should tell you that I had no plan to do that. I had decided to sail only on a Nantucket boat because there was something wild and exciting about everything connected with that famous Vieja island that I really liked. New Bedford has been taking over more and more of the whale hunting negocio últimamente, and poor old Nantucket is now far behind. But Nantucket was the first place to do it. It was where the first dead American whale was brought to shore. Where else but from Nantucket did the first whale hunters, the Nativo people, salieron en canoes to chase the great whales? And where else but the Nantucket did that first brave little boat go out, carrying stones brought the far away, so the story goes, to throw at the whales, to see when they were close enough to try hitting them with a spear from the front of the boat? Now I had one night, one day, and another night to spend in New Bedford before I could get on a boat to where I wanted to go, so I needed to figure out where I was going to eat and sleep. It was a very scary-looking night, very dark and sad, mordaz cold and cheerless. I knew no one in the place. I checked my pocket carefully and only found a few silver coins. So, wherever you go, Ishmael, I said to myself as I stood in the middle of a triste street carrying my bag and looking at the darkness to the north and the darkness to the south. Wherever you decide to sleep tonight, dear Ishmael, make sure to ask how much it costs and do not be too picky. I walked slowly down the streets and saw a sign that said the crossed harpoons, but it looked like it cost too much money and era too fancy for me. Further down the street, bright red light came from the windows of the Swordfish Inn, and the light was so warm that it had melted all the snow and ice in front of the building, while everywhere else the frozen ground was 10 inches thick and hard as stone, which hurt Miss feet when I stepped on the bumpy parts, because Miss boots were worn out from walking so much. Too much money and too fancy again, you thought, stopping for a moment to look at the bright light in the street and listen to the sound of glasses clinking inside. Pero keep going, Ishmael, I said to myself at last. Don't you hear? Move away from the door. Your torn-up boots are blocking the way. So I kept walking. Without thinking about it, I followed the streets that led toward the water, because that was where the cheapest places to stay would be, even if they weren't the most cheerful. What sad streets these were! There were big, dark blocks that looked more like shadows than casas in both sides, and here and there a single candle, like a candle moving around inside a grave. At this momento of night, on the last day of the week, this part of town was almost empty. But soon you came to a smoky light viniendo from a low, white building, with its door standing open like it wanted people to come in. It looked like anyone could eat inside, so when I walked in, the first thing I did was trip over a box full of ashes on the delantero step. Ha, I thought, as the flying bits of ash almost made me choke. Son these ashes from that destroyed city, Gomorrah? But the crushed arpones and the pez espada were different places, so this one must be called the trap. I picked myself up and heard a loud voice inside, so I pushed forward and opened the second door. It looked like a great gathering of people sitting in a very caloroso, terrible place. 100 faces turned around in their seats to look at me, and up front, someone was hitting a book while standing at a tall desk. It was a church, and the preacher was talking about complete darkness and people crying and crujiendo sus teeth. Ha, Ishmael, I said silenciosamente to myself as I backed out. What a terrible place to visit at the trap. I kept walking and finally came to a dim light not far from the water, and I heard a sad chirriante sound in the air. When I looked up, I saw a swinging sign over a door with a white painting on it that showed a tall spray of misty water and words underneath that said, "The Spouter Inn, Peter Coffin." Coffin and Spouter, those names together seemed like a bad sign, you thought. But people say Coffin is a normal name in Nantucket, and I think this Peter vino from there. The light was very dim, and the place looked quiet enough for now, and the old wooden house looked like someone had dragged it here from a place that had burned down, and the hanging sign made a sad creaking sound like it had no money, so you thought este was the perfect place to find a cheap room and buen coffee made from peas. Era una extraña kind of place. An old house with a pointed roof, and one side looked sick and was leaning over sadly. It sat on una sharp, cold corner where that wild wind called Euroclydon made more noise than it ever did around poor Pablo Bote that was being thrown around by the waves. But Euroclydon is actually a very nice gentle wind if you are inside your house, with your feet by the fire, getting warm and listo for bed. An old writer, and I have the only copy of his book that is left, once said about that wild wind called Euroclydon, "It makes a huge differencia whether you look out at it from a glass window where the cold is all on the outside, or whether you watch it from a window con ningún glass where the cold is on both sides, and where Muerte is the only one who puts in the glass." That's very true, I thought, as I remembered what he wrote. Old book, you make a lot of sense. Yes, my eyes are like windows, and my body is like the casa. Too bad they didn't llenaron all the cracks and holes and stuff some cotton in here and there. But it's too late to make any fixes now. The whole world is finished. The last stone is on top, and all the leftover pieces were taken away 1,000,000 years ago. Poor Lázaro over there, with his teeth castañando as he uses the street curve como a pillow, and shaking his rotas clothes as he shivers, he could stuff rags in both ears and put a corn cob in his mouth, and that still would not keep out the wild wind Euroclydon. Euroclydon, says old Epulon, wrapped in his red silk robe, and he had an even redder one later. Oh, nonsense! What a beautiful cold night! Look how the stars of Orion shine so bright. Look at those northern lights. Let other people talk sobre their warm places in the east where it's always summer like a greenhouse. Give me the derecho to make my own summer with my own coal fire. But what does Lázaro think? Can he warm his blue hands by holding them up toward the great northern lights? Wouldn't Lázaro rather be in Sumatra than here? Would he not much rather lie down flat along the middle of the earth where it is hottest? Would he bajar al hontún the burning pit itself just to get away from this cold? Now, that Lázaro should be stuck allí on the street in front of the rich man's door is stranger than finding a huge block of ice amarrado at a warm island. But the rich man himself also lives like a king in a palace made of ice and frozen sad sounds. And since he leads a grupo that says no drinking, he solo drinks the warm tears of children with no parents. But enough of this crying now. We are going whale hunting, and there is plenty of that still to come. Let us scrape the ice off our cold feet and see what kind of place this Spouter might be.